Welcome to ACC Nation. I'm Jim Quist. That's Will Ogenin, and our special guest is national writer Bill Bender with Sporting News. Bill, thank you for joining us and talking a little bit about college football, because there's a lot on the plate, and let's kind of jump right into it. Let's talk a little bit about this whole alliance thing, because this is the big story right at the moment. Talking about the Pac-12, Big Ten, ACC, countering the SEC's moves. And now we're hearing more today about the SEC trying to expand even further, maybe even bringing in more of the Big 12, could be former Big 12. Give us your thoughts on this picture that we have in front of us.
Well, the super conference model is upon us. That's how I feel. I think the SEC really kickstarted that with, I go back to Big Ten Media Day, walk in my hotel room, and then all of a sudden Oklahoma and Texas are going to the SEC, and I just dropped my suitcases, and I was like, well, it's going to be a long night. And it really changed everything to me, because I thought between NIL, playoff expansion, transfer portal, everything that had gone on this offseason, that we'd had enough. And that really throws a wrinkle into everything. I mean, I live in Big Ten country. I know where you guys are at, and I'm kind of running in my head, and I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts, that we're headed towards this kind of AFC, NFC model in college football that's going to feel a lot like NFL light.
Yeah, I agree. I think it kind of has, like, right now it seems like SEC versus the world, and I think eventually the SEC will gobble some of that up and we'll see some of that AFC, NFC, type of thing probably within 5 years or so.
Yeah, and well, I mean, the thing that we know with the ACC and the Big Ten is they do value academics, and that is one of the things that when you look at a super conference model that's driven by TV revenue, by the football basically, and then everything else that comes with that, the brand power from football, academics can be sidestepped. But I think the ACC and the Big Ten have always been comparable. That's why you're hearing rumors ranging from, I don't know, Virginia, North Carolina, Duke, and all these AAR schools being teamed with a lot of Big Ten. There's a lot of great academic institutions. I remember from living in Charlotte for 7 years how good the schools were down there, and then how good they are now that I live back in Ohio. All the Big Ten schools have reputations. Now, are they all football brands? That's the big question. Not compared to, the big prizes that the SEC reeled in.
Right. All right. Let me let's get into an aspect of this that nobody's talking about, at least not on a national stage that I'm seeing, but certainly the schools that feel like, oh gosh, maybe we're going to be left out. And so you named a couple of the schools out of the ACC, a couple of the schools out of the Big Ten. But what happens to those schools that aren't being talked about, that may not be on a list or may not be that powerhouse? What's going to happen? Are we going to get a completely different conference out of that?
Maybe. And I've thought, I kind of follow the TV aspect of it. When you guys mentioned that, the SEC and the ACC might be talking, and then you make this super South conference, so to speak, that would have all those SEC brands plus, the quote unquote blue bloods of the ACC in terms of football. And you look at that right now, it's what, Clemson, Miami, Florida State. I think North Carolina has a lot of brand power between their football and basketball and the jump man and everything that comes with that. And then it gets a little weird. It gets a little sticky, because then you're talking about schools that could get left out if they don't have a chair. One school that sticks out to me is Pitt, because Pitt, do they fit in the Big Ten now? Do they fit in the ACC? Do they get left behind if we go to this super conference model? And I really like what Pitt brings. I like their dual brand power, so to speak. So those are the big questions right now. I still think we're headed that way, that it's going to be driven by, and the combination of NIL and all this money. We're talking about quarterbacks making 7 figures before they step on the field.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think we all chose the wrong profession, didn't we?
Oh, we knew that a long time ago, Bill. Unfortunately. One more question for you before I let Will throw some stuff out at you. If you were to take a look at now, I posted your Sporting News top 25 preseason, which was a couple of weeks back. And of course, we had the AP today. Give us some thoughts about, where you guys are coming from with your top 25, what you saw today in the AP top 25. Anything there that is too far off to the right, too far off to the left, completely out of bounds, or does it all make sense to you?
I like the top 10. It seems like the top 10 is pretty consensus. There's the top 5, the Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, Oklahoma, Georgia monopoly over the top of the sport. All 5 are very good this year. Georgia on paper is really good. And that's why I think I was not moderately surprised, but they got some first place votes today in the AP poll. And then you go to Notre Dame. Okay. That's pretty standard. Texas A&M, a lot of people like them. The next 3 are the most interesting to me because can North Carolina crash the playoff party? Can Cincinnati do it out of the group of 5? Or can Iowa State, who has a lot coming back, can they maybe crash this party? And I think those are the 3 that really stand out to me. And then when you get outside the top 10, unless one of us starts reaching, I don't know if there's a playoff team there. Maybe LSU, maybe Oregon, maybe Miami does the unthinkable on Labor Day weekend and beats Alabama. And that's really what the sport needs. And that game there, I don't think they're going to win because Nick Saban's never lost a neutral site opener, but that game's important because it's Miami and all this NIL stuff they've been doing. And it's Alabama, this recruiting juggernaut. And I think that's one of those watch what happens because it's going to be a telling game for the future of the sport in some ways.
Interesting. So we are an ACC podcast, but when I look at this, I think both North Carolina and Miami are a bit overvalued in the rankings. The reason being is I think North Carolina, yes, they have Sam Howell, who's going to be a Heisman favorite, but they also lost over 2,000 rushing yards. They lost all these, receivers, all these skills positions. I just don't think it's automatic that the people that they're going to fill in these spots are going to reproduce that kind of production. And with Miami, I think we're asking a lot for De'Aaron King to do what he does best 9 months removed from a torn ACL. So can you kind of explain where I may be wrong in that?
I like North Carolina's position guys that they backfilled with the running back that they had. I mean, you lose Javonte and Michael, obviously you're losing a lot of production. You lose Daz Newsome, guys that are flashing in NFL camps, by the way. So I get you there. I feel that because I think the big thing with North Carolina is the week-to-week consistency now. We can be very high on them. They got a tricky opener with Virginia Tech. We can be very high on Miami. That's always easy to do. It's always easy to fall into the, hey, Miami's for real now. Did that last September. And then I think what is in common where I live, where you guys are, is Clemson has just created this ridiculous gap with everybody else. And I would argue that Ohio State has created an even bigger gap in a better conference in the Big Ten, which is mind-blowing to me in some ways.
And let's go to the Big Ten since you were just talking about it for a moment. Iowa State, obviously one of the best, easy top 5 team, but yeah, you talked about it. I don't know if there's who the second, probably Wisconsin's the second best team, but can a team like Penn State, who changed their offensive coordinator yet again, be in position to maybe sneak up on somebody this year?
I think that Penn State-Wisconsin game in the opening week's huge. That's 2 ranked teams going at it. And we're looking for somebody to step up and challenge the Buckeyes in this conference. This is a stat that I pull out freely, and it's amazing to me, is that since Urban Meyer arrived in Columbus, 2012, Penn State, Michigan, and Wisconsin, 3 good programs. I mean, these are top 20 programs every year. They're combined 1-23 against the Buckeyes. And the only victory, guys, was a Penn State win where Urban probably shouldn't have kicked a field goal and Penn State blocks the field goal and wins the game. So, Wisconsin hasn't beat Michigan or Ohio State since 2011 when J.J. Watt was there. Michigan's lost 8 in a row to the Buckeyes. It is crazy to me because I grew up in a Big Ten where in the 90s it was like everybody took their turn. And then I also grew up in the 90s where Florida State was winning the ACC every year. And now it's just become Clemson. So this is why we're having these discussions about a 12-team playoff and the sport being stale. And I kind of roll my eyes when I see these polls because I was like, well, I hate it because it's supposed to be fun, but we all kind of know how the movie's going to end.
Mhm. On the Big Ten, Indiana, a team that kind of came out of nowhere to a lot of people last year. Can they keep up that momentum this year? They felt like they had a lot of luck on their side last season.
They did, but they got a quarterback in Michael Penix Jr. It's coming back from injury, much like Derek King. I mean, that's a big one. They've got a good receiver. They've got a coach that really has done just a fantastic job. I mean, and the fact that we're talking about Bloomington and Ohio State going to Bloomington being their toughest game of the season. And this is a school that hasn't beat Ohio State since Anthony Thompson was tailback in the 1980s. It's been a long time, but I think the one thing that stood out about them last year is they played hard. They had the thrilling win against Penn State. They outclassed Michigan and Wisconsin on the field. And I think some of it is because of some of the defensive talent he's brought in there. They've got some NFL guys. So do I think they can beat Ohio State? No. But if they can get through this early part of the schedule and have a shot, I mean, I'd never thought I would tell you guys on the air that, there's a game in October between Indiana and Ohio State that could decide the Big Ten East.
Amazing. When is Harbaugh going to be fired?
I get that one all the time. That's the best way to put it, right? So I think Michigan wears the brunt of this more than anybody. Similar to how Florida State kind of wears Clemson's dominance a little bit, because we were at a point early in the playoff era where Clemson had to climb the Florida State mountain. Michigan's been absent from the national stage with the exception of the 2016 game for a while. I think Harbaugh showed up at Big Ten Media Day with a more serious he got a pay cut essentially. So you got all right, show us something that was better than last year. I don't think he's going anywhere unless they really bottom out this year. And something that I saw that's going to make it even tougher, I saw this tweet today. They play 5 ranked teams in today's AP pool. Nobody else does. So they've got a brutal schedule on top of the brutal expectations, but it all comes down to they could go 9-2. And if Ohio State beats them 70-20, we're going to have the same old discussion. So I don't know the answer to that question, but I think it's going to hinge on the Ohio State game and how they perform there.
I keep waiting for it. I actually like Harbaugh. I just don't think that's a great, I don't know why he's still there. It boggles my mind. Let's go out to the Pac-12. What are you seeing out there, and who appears to be the dominant force or the top 3 dominant forces in the Pac-12 this season?
Well, Oregon and USC have really, they're on that cusp of, this is a conference that hasn't had a playoff berth since 2016. And that was Washington. I think there would be the third team I would mention. Oregon's got some talent. They've got a good quarterback, good skill guys. Kayvon Thibodeau is probably going to be a top 5 pick. And they got a chance to show it in Columbus on September 11th against the Buckeyes. And the Buckeyes welcome them with a 9 a.m. Pacific time kickoff for that game. So they better set their alarms early. And then I think USC has calmed down. Like, if I don't answer Harbaugh hot seat questions, I'm answering them about Clay Helton. I think he's calmed down the recruiting. They've got the right quarterback. Do they have the offensive line necessary to win the Pac-12 South? And then the last team I would mention would be Arizona State. Some recruiting violations apparently alleged, and it's taken away from what's going to be a pretty good team on the field with Jaden Daniels, that offensive line, and pretty good running back at Arizona State.
Since we're tight on time here, let me just very quickly let's toss Alabama and Clemson out the window. Who are the teams that may surprise us in the SEC and the ACC?
Okay. Ole Miss is going to be a chaos team. They're going to score a ton of points. They got a quarterback in Matt Corral who led the FBS. I didn't realize this till you kind of do the research. And then you're like, wow, that guy led the FBS in total offense. He made a ton of plays. They couldn't stop anybody. They're going to be fun to watch. I mean, somebody mentioned, and it probably dovetails into my ACC answer, because they play Louisville in the opening week. And that game, guys, that could be a 5-hour game, because they're going to get up and down and score on each other a lot of points, and it's a big year for Louisville. The team that I'm high on, maybe not this year, but I think they're coming because I like the coach a lot, is Jeff Hafley in Boston College. I think they showed against Clemson that they weren't afraid last year. They've got a good quarterback from Notre Dame. He's one of those guys that you kind of see early when he's coaching. I'm really high on him. It's going to take a while. BC's been stuck where they are, but I think they've got a chance to be really good here in the next couple of years.
I definitely agree with you on Boston College. I think they have a chance to be a sleeper team in the ACC this year with a lot of the talent they brought back in another year with Hapley. But before we go, we want to get into a quasi ACC team in Notre Dame, who obviously spent the last year in the ACC, now back to an independent. I think their schedule really works out well for them this year. They have the three really big games at home with Cincinnati, USC, and UNC, but they also have to travel up to Lambeau Field for a game against Wisconsin. Could they win 10 games again this year?
It's right on that line. You're like testing me with these overs. I think their over was 8.5 or 9.5. And all of those games are tough. I mean, they got North Carolina, USC, Cincinnati. You mentioned the game in Lambeau. And they got a new quarterback in Jack Cohen. And I think that's going to make people miss Ian Book, who took a lot of criticism, but also won a lot of football games at Notre Dame. So I think they could take a small step back. And by that, I still think they can get to 9 wins, maybe 10. But it brings our conversation full circle in some ways is their next move is going to dictate a lot of things. If they cling to the independents and say, we're good with this, there might not be a lot of movement for a minute. But if they come out and say, hey, we're joining the ACC football full time, here we go, we love it. I think they're the last big prize. It's like, I always tell people, it's like kind of like playing poker. Well, the SEC just took the biggest hand. You've got to be careful when you go play it and when they have that much, behind what they're doing.
Indeed. Hey, since, like I said, we're tight on time, but I'm going to ask you one thing that we always ask everybody who's on the show. Where do you like to eat when you're out on the road, and what do you like to eat?
I lived in Charlotte. What I miss so I moved back to Ohio in 2015, and whenever I get to visit Charlotte and come back down to there in our offices, I ask for barbecue, where the nearest barbecue place is. Charlotte's got so many good ones, it's hard to pick one. But I mean, you get spoiled when you live down there, and then you move back up here where we do some things well. But I mean, y'all do barbecue in the South better than anybody else. So that's what I'll do when I go down to the office, hopefully here in September. All right. There's a lot of good spots downtown. I know that.
Now, is it vinegar, ketchup, or mustard base that you're highest on the list here?
I'd say vinegar. I like the, I think, is it East or West Carolina?
It's Eastern, yeah.
Eastern, yeah. I got hooked on that when I lived down there, and then tried to explain it to my boys back home, and very much enjoy it. And well, you're shaking your head. Am I wrong?
I lived out in Chicago for a while, and it was like,
yeah, exactly.
Talk about it. So yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure that was an interesting conversation with your friends on that one.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, but I love it. And I, like I said, and kind of just to wrap it up for me is like, I'm really looking forward to what happens next with college football. I do think, and you guys probably hit on this a little bit, that the super conference era and this NFL light and NIL, it is going to take some of the charm out of the sport we love. Going down to a place like NC State. What happens if they get left behind? What happens if Oklahoma State and Baylor and Texas Tech get left behind? And that is the casualty of this, because if they think just in terms of TV and money, yeah, it's going to be 30 to 32 brands that really dominate the sport. And I don't know how I feel about that. Part of me is excited. Yeah, you get better matchups, but I like watching college football different than I like watching the NFL.
Yeah, got it. Bill Bender, national sports writer with Sporting News. We follow you. We read you. I don't always agree with you, Bill, but, because I respect you, that's one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the show, because I love to read what you write, and absolutely had to have you on the program, and hope we can do that again somewhere down in the future. Thank you for coming on.
Hey, no problem. Thanks, guys.
I'll tell you what, that was some pretty informative stuff out of Bill Bender from Sporting News. Loved having him on. I wish we could have had him for a little longer, but tight time schedule for him. We will get him back, and we'll talk a little more in depth with Bill about myriad things. We've got a lot to to throw out on the table for him, but I'll tell you what we're going to do now. Let's take a look at this AP Top 25 that we talked about a little earlier with Bill. There are some teams here from the ACC, which I think surprised you that they were as high as they are. and maybe some teams that are in that receiving votes category that I think both of us agree maybe ought to be in the top 25 already. But if they're not now, they probably will be in a couple weeks. Top 5 teams, Alabama, no surprises there. Any thoughts on that from you? I mean, I just think they're head and shoulders above everybody this year at this point. So.
Well, yeah, I mean, one of the common themes in a lot of teams this year is going to be a lot of experience back with players being able to use that extra year. That's not necessarily the case with Alabama. They don't have, the 18, 19, 20 starters back like some of the teams that we'll talk about later do, but what they do have is Nick Saban, number one, and number two, an ability to just recruit in insane recruiting classes. I mean, the one they just signed, the 21 class, was one of the highest rated ever. And when you're basically racking up number one recruiting classes and can put and get them ready for the field in a couple of years, they're gonna you're gonna be really good. The only question I can see with this team is really, they lost their offensive coordinator. Steve Sarkisian's now at Texas. Bill O'Brien stepping in. Can he, make that offense, good enough for Alabama to run roughshod through the SEC? And to be perfectly honest with you, I don't see that being much of an issue. They're going to out talent pretty much everybody on their schedule most weeks.
I have a big question at quarterback and the offensive coordinator, obviously. I mean, when you start fresh like that, you're going to have some stumbles out of the gate. And as Bill kind of pointed to, but, nothing more than pointing to, this could happen. If this did happen, it's not going to happen. But them opening up against Miami, if they stumble on offense, if their quarterback doesn't click, doesn't get that offense, and they can't get things going there, I don't know that Miami's the team to knock them off, but you don't want to lose an opener like that. And as I guess you had pointed, or Bill had pointed out, one of the two of you had pointed out that Saban hadn't lost an opener on.
I would love to take credit for that, but that was Bill.
That was Bill. Okay. Next up is number 2, Oklahoma, and of course Spencer Rattler is the guy. Mm-hmm. And I think he's at this point maybe the top Heisman.
Yeah, I think he has the best odds to win the Heisman, if I remember correctly. But yeah, when you have a guy like that, a quarterback, you're going to be ranked pretty high. And we know Oklahoma on pretty much any given week is going to put up a lot of points. The question is, can they stop anybody? I mean, they can kind of at their level, but when they face, better offenses, we've seen they've just gotten torched on a, consistent basis. So that's the one thing they've got to really work on this season in order to be a team that can be a national title contender.
I'll be honest with you. When I watched Oklahoma last season, the overall picture, I wasn't impressed. And I kept scratching my head. I like Spencer Rattler. I like what he can do. And I like what that offense can do. But your point about that defense, that's a problem. You're not a whole team there. And I think that could be a problem for them. We'll see.
Mm-hmm. And let me just throw in. They have some interesting, games on their schedule. I mean, look at, early on in the season. I mean, they have, a couple, in the middle of the season, you're going to have to take on Texas. And by the time they do, what is Texas going to be? TCU is a team that people think could be a bit of a sleeper in the Big 12 this year. And obviously Iowa State, who, is not too far behind them in these polls.
At number 3, it's Clemson. And again, no surprise. It was either going to be Clemson or Alabama. It's a reload situation. I'm not sure why there's not as much faith in Clemson this year as in years past, maybe because Trevor Lawrence is gone. he didn't have the best start there at Jacksonville, by the way, over the weekend. No big deal, but I think they do have a quarterback who has the potential, in my eyes, to be better than Trevor Lawrence. Now, that's saying a lot.
Yeah, what you see in DJ Uyunglele, we saw him in the 2 games last year against Boston College and Notre Dame. That the moment is not too big for him. He knew what he was doing. He looked very poised. He's definitely ready to take over on a full-time basis. And you're right, he could be better than Trevor Lawrence in a couple of years. I think the reason why you might think people might be a little down on Clemson in a way, what was the last thing we saw in terms of Clemson football? Just getting torched by Ohio State. And
Yeah.
I think that kind of leaves a sour taste in some people's mouths.
Yep, I agree. That's one of the things that it's easier to go back on what you knew in the past than what you know in the present and the future. And everybody wants to be a little more conservative in their picks. I think most people on that list who vote for the AP tend to be that way. There's a few people. Lauren Brownlow did say she voted for Army, and she was the only person who did. But that's really not out in left field either. I think that's I can't falter for that. I think that's probably Army is seems like every year is one of those teams that just comes up and surprises people, but only to a degree. Number 4 is Ohio State out of the Big Ten, and I'm not sure here what to think, Will. Honestly, do you feel like they've picked up something here, or is this a vote out of the past?
They have a interesting quarterback situation around. Nobody has been deemed the starter yet. A lot of people are assuming CJ Stroud is going to take the job. I don't think they've named the starter, but I think Ryan Day has said he has pulled ahead, and we obviously know the story with Quinn Ewers, who is skipping a senior year of high school to enroll at Ohio State, kind of to get that NIL money. Whoever's going to be the starter, and most people assume it's going to be Stroud, are going to have a nice complement of receivers. Chris Olave, who's been there a few years, but he's back. And he's going to probably be one of the better receivers in the entire country. And that the defense is going to be pretty good this year too. And I see no issue with him being ranked 4th.
Number 5, it's Georgia, and this is a team that a couple of months ago I picked to upset Clemson because they are playing in their opener. It's Georgia and Clemson in Charlotte. In Charlotte, for all intents and purposes, it's like a home game for Clemson.
Mm-hmm. One thing for sure, assuming I'm pretty sure the stadium will be at full capacity, but I think that game is almost guaranteed to be a sellout. I don't think there will be a seat to be sold once that game kicks off. It's going to be it's obviously the game of the week, and week 1. You got and again, Georgia, they have a good defense yet again. That's kind of what drives them to be there. Their offense has its moments, but it's if you're of the 5 teams that are ranked in the top 5, they probably have the worst offense of the 5, but they might have the second best defense of the 5. The thing with them obviously is after they have a pretty easy schedule. UAB is a good, group of 5 team, but that game's in Athens, so they probably won't pose much of a threat. South Carolina, they have a new coach. Vanderbilt has a new coach. Arkansas could be plucky, but Georgia should roll. At Auburn, even though Auburn is a decent team, I think Georgia can win that. Kentucky, they've been kind of flying under the radar. It's the bat, and I think that's the thing that's in Georgia's favor is they have a really manageable schedule. I mean, even on the back half of the season, their toughest game, obviously, is the cocktail party game in Jacksonville. Missouri is a team people think could be really good, but that's a home game, and obviously the in-state rivalry game is also at home. So this is a team that looks like, just based off the schedule, is almost a lock for double-digit wins.
So the next 5 teams, we took a little more in-depth look at the top 5. Well, let's take a brief look at the next 5 on our list. At number 6, it's Texas A&M. At number 7, Iowa State. At number 8, Cincinnati. Number 9, Notre Dame. And number 10, North Carolina. What do you see among these teams? Texas A&M.
Well, yeah, think about Texas A&M, and this is going to be the question. How do they replace Kellen Mond? He was pretty much a 4-year starter there. Now he's the backup quarterback for the Vikings and will probably start at some point this season because Kirk Cousins will probably catch COVID. That's I don't want to get into that, right? But yeah, they have Jimbo's recruiting pretty well right there now. Obviously, the question is, can he sustain it? Because we all know how Florida State ended. Iowa State is a team that I think a lot of people want to see upset Oklahoma and win the Big 12. I think they're a team that had a lot of luck go their way as well, but a lot of experience and a really good running back in Breece Hall. And their quarterback situation's looking pretty good too. Cincinnati, obviously the best group of 5 team. They did lose their defensive coordinator. Marcus Freeman is now at Notre Dame, who is number 9. So how much of that? They have a pretty solid quarterback in Desmond Ridder. I think they're going to be a defensive minded team still, and I think that's going to go a long ways with them. Notre Dame, as we talk with Bill, I think that they have a lot going in their way with the schedule, but their quarterback's a bit of a question mark because we don't know how Jack Cohn will be able to handle things there. Obviously, they have a good running back in Kyron Williams to hand the ball off to if they get stuck in the passing game. And we talked about my concerns with Carolina with Bill at number 10. Just I think asking them to replace over 2,000 rushing yards and Daz Newsome and the other receiver. I think that's a lot to ask for a team to just suddenly be top 10. I think the thing that Bill hit on during the interview was their consistency, and I think that's the one thing that plagued them last year. Remember, they lost to Florida State,
Right.
Lost in a shootout to Virginia, who's beat them 4 years in a row. So they have to play consistently every week if they're going to be a threat to Clemson.
And one of the things I see with North Carolina is that they're a building program. Mac Brown is taken them a long way in a very short time. Done a great job, but they are still building. They're not, I don't think at that point like Clemson or Alabama where they just next man up and they reload and it's easy breezy. Cohn at Notre Dame, I believe, even though I think his rep coming from where he was playing is a little sketchy, I think the difference here for him is going to be that he has a much better line, he has much better offensive weapons, and he has coaches that are going to be spending an inordinate time with him. I can spit that out to really polish him up, and I think he'll step up to the plate. Will he be an Ian Book? I don't know. I think he'll be equal. He has the potential to be better than Ian Book because Ian, in my book, was I had to get that one in there. He lacked at times, I thought there was some pages missing from that book. Anyway, move on. It just gets worse. The next 5, Oregon at number 11, Wisconsin at 12, Florida at 13, Miami at 14. And at 15 is USC, which will make Xavier very happy because that's his team. At 11, Oregon. And, Bill touched on that for just a little bit. I think Oregon's in a good place. And at number 11, that seems about right. Maybe a tad high, but we'll see. We'll see how the season plays out.
Yeah, I think the question with Oregon is who starts a quarterback. I think a lot of people think former Boston College player, quarterback Anthony Brown could be the starter there. They might have the best defensive player in the country in Kayvon Thibodeau, as Bill alluded to earlier. they even with they're a step down from what they were, say, a decade ago, but Mario Cristobal just continues to build Oregon into a consistent top 10 to 15-ish team and among the best in the Pac-12. And let me just go down to the other Pac-12 school in USC. I think they're the most intriguing team of this 11 to 15 team, 11 to 15 set of a group of teams here, because as Bill mentioned, Clay Helton is always on the hot seat. It's almost like the hot seat's sponsored by him or something. But this has the potential to be Clay Helton's best team. Keaton Slovis is some people think he could be a first round pick this year. I don't know if he's that. I don't know if he's quite there. But with that offense, I think they have the potential to put up a lot of points on the board. Going backwards a little bit, Wisconsin, we saw what Graham Mertz could do in the first week, but then after COVID kind of threw everything out, he just wasn't the same. We'll take a wait and see approach to Wisconsin. If he's more like the guy who torched Illinois in his first game and through all those touchdowns, then yeah, Wisconsin could be that. Florida, they're right where they usually are, consistent top 15-ish team, maybe a little bit better. They're Coach Mullen continues to recruit very well down there. And we talked about Miami. My concerns with that, we've talked about over the span of the offseason, my concerns with Miami. I think I'm going to wait. I'm taking a wait and see approach with D'Eriq King. Not quite 9 months removed from a torn ACL. And his mobility was what made him such a good quarterback. And I laid out some other concerns with the team over the span of the offseason. Like they're undisciplined. They were the most penalized team in the league, even though they lose some great defensive linemen. They probably won't be getting to the quarterback as well, but I think they'll stop the pass better. They might have the best secondary in the ACC. Still, I think the offensive line is a bit overrated. I think they're just okay. They really need that running game to step up outside of D'Eriq King. They need a consistent running game if they're going to be holding up to that ranking.
Next up, 16 is LSU. You're talking about a coach that was on a hot seat all of a sudden. Orgeron was after having the highs of the Joe Burrow time, and then the next season just completely imploding. But this stuff happens. But in SEC country, especially when you're in Baton Rouge, man, they don't take stuff lightly there. So, but at 16, that's not a bad recovery for them. Number 17, a team that you guys talked about a little bit, Indiana, which is an interesting squad. And I think, maybe they're in a position now that they're going to take this for a ride for a while. And number 18 is Iowa, number 19, Penn State, and number 20, Washington.
3 Big Ten teams in there: Indiana, Iowa, Penn State. Indiana, like we talked about, they're a team that had a lot of luck go their way, and if I know one thing, it's that luck's not repeatable, so they may not be quite as good as they were last year, but there's still something there. I believe in this team as being at least a top 25 team. We talked about Penn State and the questions there. Can another offensive coordinator bring some more success to that offense? I'm kind of taking a wait and see approach with them too. LSU, I don't know. I don't think they're not going to be as good as 2019. I don't think they're going to be quite as bad as 2020, but I'm skeptical of this ranking. I just think it's asking a bit much of them right now. I know they're 2 seasons removed from a national championship, but I have a lot. I just have a lot of questions. And Washington probably has the best all around defense in the Pac-12. Their question with them is offense. They just weren't very good, but like a lot of the Pac-12 schools, they only played a handful of games last season, so they really was hard to get any sort of flow offensively in the Pac-12 because they played so few games.
That's a point that you just made there that I think applies to just about every team because of the way that COVID impacted training, and not having spring, not having the practices even sometime into the right up to the season, and then having games pulled out from underneath of you left and right. That threw everybody off. And that includes those of us who observe teams and try to figure out what's going on, right? So we're going to see something different this year. We'll get a better feel. Mike Barber of the Richmond Times-Dispatch tweeted something out today that I thought was point on. He's one of the voters on the AP Top 25, was indicating some people were bringing up they didn't think certain teams should be at this level or whatever. And Mike's thought was that, if we were to wait 3 weeks in before we started voting, then we would have a much clearer picture. But he knows that that's not the way that the system works. And you can't, one person's not going to change that. We've had that discussion several times ourselves, that if we could just wait for 3 games to be played, get an idea of what's going on with the team, whether they're clicking, whether the coaches know what they're doing, the players know what they're doing, and it's all coming together. And by the time they hit that first big game or a big game somewhere in that 3 to 4 range, we should have some kind of an idea of really what a team is all about. At that point, you can truly rank them. But as it is right now, there's going to be some teams on here. And I think that Bill alluded to this, that basically after 10 or so, maybe even fewer, after we get to that 3 or 4 game period in the schedule, you're going to see some teams drop significantly and others rise up. And we're going to talk about a couple of ACC teams that are going to rise up here in just a minute. Let's get into our next group. Texas at number 21. Are we blowing smoke here with Texas, or are they really? I mean, it seems kind of early to be saying this team. 21 is really not that big of a deal, but I mean, are they that good?
I ask myself the same question. I wonder if this is sort of a reputation rank with Texas. I don't know if they're top 25 good, but they are a talented group of people, but they have obviously pieces, and you're banking on Sarkisian going in there and basically having the offense that did so well at Alabama and at Texas, and I think that's asking a lot, right, and right now especially.
Right up front. That's yeah. We'll see. Everything plays out, right? We'll give it a couple of weeks. Number 22, Coastal Carolina. Probably some, good reason for Coastal Carolina to be there. I don't know. Again, is this a top 25 team?
I think so. Shouts to the Sun Belt getting ranked 22nd and 23rd. Coastal was the darling of college football last year. Remember that game with BYU that they scheduled in 48 hours that went down to the last play of the game where BYU got stopped at the goal line. Just an outstanding game. And a lot of that team is back this year. We remember Grayson McCall as their quarterback. He was a freshman last year. Now he's coming back for a sophomore year. And I think that, and like I say, the coach is back, everyone's back. So I think you can expect some big things from Coastal. The only question is, again, they had a little luck on their side. Can they maybe overcome some of the luck, maybe not going their way this season?
23, as you said, another Sun Belt team, the Raging Cajuns out of Louisiana Lafayette.
Yeah, another team out of the Fun Belt. This is a team that if you follow college football, closely at all. They have been probably the most consistent team out of the Sun Belt for quite a while. Billy Napier is a coach that has been in demand for a while, but he has stuck it out there in Lafayette, and they got a big game right off the bat on opening weekend, week 1 at Austin to take on the aforementioned Texas Longhorns. And that they are a run-based team. They run the ball a lot, and they just that they control the clock and put up points that way. And I think that game could be very interesting. And if Lafayette wins that game, oh boy, we're gonna hear it on the Texas side.
Oh yeah, everybody will be pointing their fingers and laughing. Number 24, number 25 are Pac-12 teams. Utah at 24, 25 is Arizona State.
Yeah, Utah tends to be a team that just consistently flies under the radar, but they are, a consistent team, consistently winning 7-8 games every year, going to bowls. And, and they are kind of a sleeper in a way in the Pac-12 with, at least in their portion of the Pac-12. I mean, they're a defensive minded team. They're solid on offense, but Kyle Whittingham has been such a good coach there for a long time, and they just consistently they say churn out bowl type seasons, and I don't think you can ask too much more than that. And Arizona State, we know they have a lot of potential with that team. The issue with them is, as Bill mentioned earlier, is the NCAA cloud hanging over them with the recruiting issues. Jaden Daniels is a really good quarterback. They're recruiting at a level higher than what they've been in quite some time. I think they have a lot of talent, but again, at the same time, how much is that NCAA cloud going to hang over them this season? You know what I mean?
Do know what you mean. Let's look at the top 25. Let's take a look at the two teams out of the ACC that are polling votes in the receiving votes category. At number 31 is NC State, the Wolfpack, and at number 39 is Boston College, the Eagles. And I think that both of these teams probably should have had a shot at being in the top 25. But again, we go sometimes by what occurred last year. The last thing we saw, trends, whatever. I believe both of these teams are going to be dynamic this season, and we'll see them venture into the top 25 after maybe a couple of games.
Yeah, I agree that both teams definitely deserve to get votes. I don't know if they are top 25 right now, but like you said, could they get there in a couple of weeks with a good start? Yeah, definitely. Remember, NC State is going to get their quarterback back and healthy this year. Definitely was outstanding. In limited action last year, and I continue to say they have the deepest running back stable of any team in the ACC. I think that's going to get them go a long way for them. And Boston College, I've made it known my love for them this season. Phil Dracovic is a really good quarterback. Their skill positions are really good. One of the best offensive lines in the league. I think this defense can take a step forward this year, and improve with a full off season and more time in Coach Hafley's system. I think their team we could be seeing definitely in the top 25 early on in the season.
Want more ACC sports news and interviews? Make ACCNation.net your homepage or follow us on Google News. Be sure to subscribe to ACC Nation on your favorite podcast or streaming radio platform. While you're there, we'd appreciate a rating and your support through PayPal. Follow us on social media at ACC Nation. And you'll find Will on Twitter at Will's World MN, and I'm at ACC The Q. Until next time, cheers.
Skål.